Welcome back to the Farm Source podcast. I'm Luke Bilton, and today I'm coming to you fresh from what was a very cold but incredibly productive trip to Boston last week. We literally got out just before the massive winter storm hit, but it was already freezing. I was with a big queue of people at Uniqlo buying Heat Tech emergency hat and top, and that's the only fashion advice you're going to get on this podcast. But even in the cold, Boston is such an incredible life science hub. We took some time to walk around the frozen Charles River into Cambridge, called the most innovative square mile on the planet, and it really does live up to that reputation. You're surrounded by MIT, Koch Institute, Novartis, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Amgen, Beam Therapeutics, Lilly's just down the road, and all of this within a concentrated area. It's a remarkable city to be in. And we were there for a few reasons. First, we're getting ready for CDMO Live Americas, which we're hosting in the heart of the historic Boston Back Bay area at the Sheraton this October. And for events, location really does matter. There's a huge difference between attending an out-of-town event versus being right in the city centre. And being in Back Bay means we can use that city location to create amazing experiences for attendees, whether that's at the Sheraton itself, which is really impressive, or the different venues we're looking at for evening reception events. And going back to the Charles River, we're going to be hosting a run over the bridges, which is going to be very special in the fall. Much more on all that very soon. We're also there to spend time with our partners at MassBio, who are absolutely crucial to the Massachusetts life science ecosystem. We'll be working very closely with them in the months ahead. But the main thing I want to talk to you about today is External Manufacturing Leaders Boston, the event that we hosted when we were there. For those who haven't heard of External Manufacturing Leaders before, let me explain what it is. It's a series of exclusive think tanks that brings together senior biopharma professionals for confidential peer-to-peer discussions on the most pressing challenges in manufacturing strategy. The events run under Chatham House rules, which means we capture all the insights and share the themes and discussions, but nothing is attributed to any individual. This helps to create an environment where people can really open up and share what they're actually dealing with. And we hosted this event at the Capitol Grill in Boston, which is an excellent private dining venue, co-hosted with our partners at Anova Group. We had a great cross-section of East Coast biopharma represented in the room, with leaders from Takeda, Biogen, Eli Lilly, Beam Therapeutics, Crescent, UCB, and more. We've just released a full report to give you all the insights from this session, but here's my overview of the key themes that emerged. Firstly, China was a big topic of conversation. For many biotechs, Chinese manufacturing isn't optional, they're already deeply integrated. One executive explained that when they're at an early stage, they use Chinese suppliers, and now as they're scaling, tariffs and how to navigate this situation has become their number one challenge. And that felt really common across the room. We heard that it can be 50% cheaper to outsource early-stage biologics to China. And for cash-constrained biotechs, this is existential, and it's not all about cost. China also offers many operational advantages. Someone explained that if a project's falling behind in China, they can magically find 300 people to throw at it, in a way that's hard to imagine in the EU or US. The other big theme, closely related, is the US capacity constraints. The problem is, while the political pressure is on domestic manufacturing, there simply isn't enough US capacity. One attendee said, biotechs are having to book 18 months ahead and still finding it hard to steer. For ADCs, we heard capacity is completely tied up. One attendee was saying you can count on 2 or 3 fingers the seasoned commercial partners which are available, and it's a similar story in other modalities such as sterile fill finish. There are also concerns about how US facilities are lagging when it comes to automation. Someone explained that CDMOs aren't seeing the ROI from investing in digital infrastructure, and that in the shorter term, it's cheaper for them just to move people around. The challenge is, overseas companies in China and elsewhere are using automation, which means they can manufacture cheaper and faster. So there's a growing gap there. We talked about what the companies are actually doing about this. And despite the constraints they're under, resilience dominated the discussion. Attendees talked about how resilience is their top priority for this year. In this volatile world, everyone's focus is how to build a network that can be as resilient as possible. But it's clear that full dual sourcing isn't feasible for everyone. Volume and costs often don't warrant it. So creative approaches are needed for resilience. Many companies are finding a way through by consolidating, building partnerships where they can put multiple molecules through one CDMO, which helps to reduce repeating development work and moving faster. Smart contracting is also essential, including clauses for batch defects and supply failures. And while there's definitely frustrations around a lack of automation, there is real optimism about the possibilities of AI. One attendee explained how they've been building digital twins in a very short period of time. Something that used to take 6 months with a coder can now be accomplished in days, meaning it's easier than ever to model scenarios with CDMOs. And from a global pharma perspective, we talked about how AI can really help enable standardization across different regions. However, there was a discussion about AI's maturity and whether it can actually achieve all of this alone yet, without a second pair of human eyes to double check and verify. We had an interesting discussion about elevating the function of external manufacturing. And while some of the biotechs feel as though there's no real leadership gap between the business's priorities and the manufacturing side, the bigger the company, the more that gap can widen. One delegate explained that the C-suite just doesn't get it. And while sometimes the manufacturing side can assume that leadership knows what's happening, what the CDMOs are doing, what shortages were averted, very often they don't. So there's definitely a communication gap to be addressed. It was also discussed that there's a skills gap too, and one of the most common is around financial acumen. When people who come into external manufacturing from the lab bench, they might just assume that contracts go through legal, but it's important to really understand what those contracts enable you to do and how they protect you. And there was a general leadership message about reframing CDMOs as strategic partners, not just suppliers to be procured tactically. And despite the volatility, there are reasons for optimism. It looks as though biotech M&A is now happening, and investors are asking smarter questions about manufacturing. The investment community is now talking about formulation, CMC, and drug delivery as a way to understand and de-risk investments, which can be a positive thing. It was also discussed that for cell and gene therapy, the FDA is showing real flexibility and fast-tracking approvals, which should be a positive for the sector. So, to summarise, there were 5 strategic imperatives for the year ahead that came out of the discussion. 1. Navigate China with pragmatism over politics. Chinese manufacturing isn't optional for biotechs, and it's a huge and growing market for pharma. So rather than attempting wholesale reshoring that US capacity can't currently support, nuanced strategies are needed. 2. Build selective, not universal resilience. Focus resources on the highest value products, maintaining warm backup relationships for critical assets, and design contracts with clear provisions for supply failures. 3. There is a request that CDMOs invest more in digital infrastructure as a competitive necessity. That means real-time batch visibility, digital records, predictive analytics. These are becoming table stakes. 4. Elevate external manufacturing to a strategic function, reframing what we do from sourcing to strategic risk management, which can be communicated through executive steering committees and integrated risk dashboards. And 5. The aim should be to build for 8-year timelines, not 4-year political cycles. Aim to build resilient strategies which are designed to withstand multiple administrations. As one attendee said, there are a lot of valid concerns, but there's also a lot of noise and clutter at the moment. Administrations come and go, and in pharma, we need to take a much longer view, building resilience that will stand the test of time. And I think that really captures the mindset needed right now. So, I want to say a huge thank you to Innova for co-hosting the event with us. Their insights as a CDMO with 14 sites across Europe and the US brought a really valuable perspective to the discussion. If you want the full report, and I really recommend you do, there's a lot more detail in there than I could cover today. You can download it from pharmasource.global. We'll be announcing dates for the next ExM Leaders events very soon, so if this sounds like the kind of room you want to be in, just let us know. Until next time, thank you for listening to the PharmaSource podcast.